Aston Martin are an oddity on the Formula 1 grid. They have no right to be second in the Constructors' Championship after finishing 7th last season. That just doesn't happen. They are a historic car company, synonymous with luxury and style. Just ask James Bond, he knows. And yet they are as close to a father-son run business as you could get in the Formula 1 world. They don't quite make sense, and while some things are very clearly working for them this season, some things, or someone, obviously isn't. Lance Stroll is an oddity, and his presence at Aston Martin creates a dilemma for the team. Should he stay, or should he go? Let's find out. You might know Lawrence Stroll as the owner of a Formula 1 team, but there's far more to him than that. His father was a Canadian fashion importer, and he took the family business forward from there, becoming a billionaire fashion mogul with links to many luxury brands worldwide. He's always had an interest in racing, through his son, through the racetrack he owned in Canada, and as a personal passion. When the owner of Force India, the king of good times Vijay Mallya, became embroiled in a mind-bogglingly big fraud case with the Indian government, like literally billions of US dollars big, the team went up for sale. Lawrence Stroll, with a bank account big enough that it no longer matters, and a passion for motorsports, led a consortium of buyers to save the team from collapse. By the end of the 2018 season, his son Lance Stroll had proved himself to be a capable driver in Formula 1. He had secured a podium in his debut season with Williams, finishing 3 points behind veteran teammate and former Ferrari stalwart Felipe Massa, a feat that shouldn't be underestimated. In 2018, Williams' decline was in full swing. Stroll regularly outperformed his teammate Sergei Sirotkin, and was definitely deserving of another season in the sport. Where better to carry on your career than at your dad's team? Did Lawrence just buy the team to give his son a guaranteed seat in Formula 1? That's a question we'll never know the true answer to, but even for a man as rich as Lawrence Stroll, buying a Formula 1 team just to make your son happy would be beyond extravagant at best and fortune-destroying at worst. The team was renamed as Aston Martin after another consortium led by Lawrence paid almost $250 million to save the iconic brand from going under. It is estimated that Lawrence owns around 20% of the company at the moment. In a statement to shareholders after the purchase, Stroll described the move as a significant long-term investment and championed the firm as making the world's most iconic luxury cars, designed and built by very talented people. Lawrence is not a man that is frivolous with his money, whether that is buying a Formula 1 team or a luxury car brand. He is in it to win, something Jenson Button reiterated recently. Whatever the reasons that he came and bought that team, and a lot of it was all about Lance, that's not it now. He told me in Singapore last year, "Mark my words, within 2 years we're going to be winning races, and in 3 years we're going to be winning championships." Lawrence is not in Formula 1 just to participate, or to give his son a guaranteed seat. He is here to win, and that is where Lance might be a problem. Let's take a second to talk about Lance. It isn't a great image for him driving on his father's team. There is a running joke in the paddock that he's the only driver in Formula 1 with a permanent contract. But he is in Formula 1 because he is good enough. He drove well at Williams and has secured 3 podium finishes during his career, something that very few Formula 1 drivers can claim to have done. But is he deserving of a seat at Aston Martin anymore? The team are living up to Lawrence Stroll's claim. They could win races this year, never mind next year. And if they carry on this success, I believe they could contest the title in 2025. Is Lance the right driver to help that happen though? It's hard to assess his driving in recent seasons. He's been fortunate enough to sit across the garage from a 4-time champion for the last 2 seasons, and now he has a 2-time champion who's finding his best form in over a decade in the other car. That is a high bar for comparison. This season has been especially disappointing for him. In Monaco, the team said he had floor damage during qualifying when explaining his exit in Q2. The top 10 was covered by less than 0.4 of a second in that session, an almost unbelievably close field, but he was still well off the pace. He was 5th fastest in Q1, so the damage is believable, but it is just another unfortunate incident that has plagued this season, something which the very best in Formula 1 somehow managed to avoid. He had a chance during the race to regain some places and get a points finish though. The Aston Martin was fast in Monaco, far faster than everyone else but Red Bull. There was a Williams, 2 Alpha Tauris, and 2 McLarens in front of him that should have been passable, but he displayed the same desperation and impatience that Sergio Perez did, ruining his race with mistakes made while trying to rush through the field. The parallels are obvious. Both drivers have teammates who are outperforming them, and both drivers are desperate to prove they can match their teammates. In their rush to prove they are as good as their teammates though, they've both proved why they will never be on that level. To be a world champion in Formula 1, you can't just want it more than anyone else. You have to have the belief that you're good enough to deserve it. The best drivers don't force their wins because they know they will come to them eventually if they just drive at their best. Stroll and Perez failed to do that in Monaco. In Miami, Stroll had qualifying issues as well. Aston Martin tried to get both cars through to Q2 on a single set of tyres to save a fresh set of sauce for Q3, a session they had a 100% appearance rate in at that point of the season. Significant track evolution made that a challenge, and though Alonso was able to progress, Stroll was not. He lost a chunk of time to Alonso in the final third of the lap, and that deficit proved a crucial difference. Again, comparing him to a 2-time world champion is tough, but if Aston Martin wants to win championships, Stroll has to be on that level. In the first 4 races of the season, he was only a small step behind Fernando, but 2 bad races in a row is bringing a mountain of criticism down upon him. Former Aston Martin strategy director Bernie Collins, who worked with Stroll during a time with the team, thinks he's not received the credit he has perhaps deserved in Formula 1 to date. "I think he's been judged a bit harshly," Collins explained in Azerbaijan. "One of the problems has been the drivers he's been racing against have always been underrated as well." That comment is specifically aimed at Sergio Perez, who's now showing his class at Red Bull. According to Bernie, Lance is doing all the things he should be. He turns up early to go through data, he stays fit, he learns from the incredibly successful teammates he has. But sometimes, Formula 1 drivers can't get that final percentage point of performance they need to be a champion. That's just the harsh reality of this sport. This leaves Lawrence Stroll and Aston Martin in a bit of a dilemma. Is Lance Stroll the person to partner Alonso, or should they be looking for someone else? The thing Lance is lacking is that confidence that driving at a top team brings. Sergio Perez took a couple of seasons to settle into having a competitive car at Red Bull, something he hadn't really had before in his career. Perez might not be on Max's level now, and he probably won't ever be, but he looks comfortable in the car and confident in his own ability. Maybe Lance will find that after a few seasons of driving a competitive car, but like Sergio, it's hard to see him ever competing with Alonso. At the moment, Lance's issues in the last 2 races have turned Aston Martin into a one-man Constructors' Championship team. Despite Alonso's performances, Aston Martin are just a single point ahead of Mercedes. The Brackley-based team have had a slower start to the year than Aston Martin, but thanks to having 2 drivers competing at the same level, are bringing the fight to their better performing customers. Of the top teams, Aston Martin has by far the biggest gap between their 2 drivers in the championship standings. Alonso is 12 points behind Perez, who is driving the supposedly unbeatable Red Bull. Lance is behind both Ferraris and Mercedes. Mercedes might be sneaking up behind Aston Martin in the constructors' standings, but that isn't thanks to anything Toto Wolff's team is doing. They'll be sending Lance Stroll thank you cards in the post if he carries on failing to score points. Like I said, Lance is not a bad driver. He doesn't have to be fighting his teammate for podiums. Every team has a driver who outperforms the other. But he cannot be getting beaten by McLarens and Alpines. He is losing 7-0 to Alonso in qualifying this season. You can't ignore that. But his recent bad form isn't enough proof that he needs to go from Aston Martin yet. 2 bad races should not be enough to assume the next 16 will be bad as well. But Lance does need to start turning things around. He needs to string together some points finishes. Stop looking at Alonso and trying to beat him. Instead, he needs to focus on his own race. Otherwise, he's going to put his father in the awkward position of having to replace him. Aston Martin are a team on the up. They're going to be able to get any driver they want, and Lance needs to prove that he deserves to be that driver. Do you think he can do it? Or will his bad form continue this season until Aston Martin are left with no choice but to replace him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.